"The flowers don't match the tablecloth," the funeral director whispered, as if that detail mattered when my husband's casket stood before us. Rows of chairs were empty. Not just empty, deserted. My parents, my best friend, even the cousins who swore they'd always be there, they were across town, clinking glasses at my sister's engagement party. I sat alone in black, fingers trembling against the rosary beads he once gave me. His photo leaned against the casket, smiling unbothered, as if mocking the silence that surrounded me. The priest's voice echoed, ashes to ashes, but all I could hear was the absence of familiar voices. The absence was louder than the hymn. My phone buzzed in my lap. A single message from Mom. "We need to talk. Now." Then the screen filled. 22 missed calls, one after another, like an alarm clock I never set. I wanted to throw the phone into the dirt. I wanted to scream at the sky. But instead, I pressed my palm against the polished wood of his casket. Cold. Final. Have you ever had family cross your boundaries, so cruelly you start doubting if they were ever family at all? Let me know in the comments. The earth opened as they lowered him down, yet the only thing burning was the question twisting inside me. What could possibly be urgent enough for my mother to disturb her daughter's grief after choosing champagne over condolences? That was the moment I understood. Grief reveals truth sharper than any blade. The phone wouldn't stop vibrating in my hand. 23, 24. Each call stacked on top of the last like weights crushing my chest. Beside me, the funeral director cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, would you like a moment alone?" His eyes lingered on the barren seats, a sympathy he couldn't mask. I nodded, because I didn't want him watching me crumble. When the last mourner, an old neighbor who barely knew my husband, placed a flower on the casket and left, the chapel was mine. Mine and hollow. The calls finally stopped. Silence filled the air, so thick I could hear the hum of the lights above. I opened my phone, thumb hovering over Mom's message. "We need to talk." Now, what could she possibly want? An explanation? An excuse? Or worse, a demand? I typed and deleted 3 words. "Not now, Mom." My fingers shook. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of thinking she still had access to me. Not here, not now. Instead, I stood, my black heels echoing across the marble floor. My eyes landed on the only flower arrangement that hadn't wilted. White lilies, my husband's favorite. He once told me lilies looked like forgiveness frozen in bloom. Forgiveness. The word felt poisonous. The phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. "Pick up. She won't stop until you do." I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. Someone else was pulling strings behind the curtain. And suddenly the funeral felt less like closure and more like a stage. I didn't answer. Instead, I slipped the phone into my clutch and pressed it shut, as though I could cage the chaos inside. But the chapel door creaked open. A draft curled around me, lifting the hem of my black dress. I turned, half expecting to see my mother finally arrive. Instead, it was the janitor, startled to find me still here. He muttered an apology, his keys jangling like wind chimes, and disappeared again. Alone, I sank into the first pew. My body wanted to collapse, but my mind kept circling that anonymous text. "She won't stop until you do." Who was she? My mother? My sister? Both? The engagement party was still happening. I imagined the champagne fizz, the laughter, the music swelling as my sister twirled in her new dress. My husband's absence didn't ripple their world. His death hadn't cost them a single beat. I pulled the rosary tighter in my palm until the beads left little imprints. My husband had once whispered, "Don't let them steal your peace, even when they try." Peace felt like a foreign country. The phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I listened. My mother's voice, sharp and urgent. "This isn't the time to be dramatic. You need to come home. There's something in the will you don't understand." Her words crackled, almost frantic. I looked at the casket one last time, and for the first time that day, Grief bent into something else, suspicion. I left the chapel in a haze, the night air thick with the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. Street lights flickered, casting broken halos on the ground. My heels clicked fast, a rhythm louder than my thoughts. The word will pulsed in my ears. My husband's affairs had been simple, or so I believed. We owned a modest home, a joint account, nothing extravagant. So why was my mother of all people, speaking like she held the keys to his last breath? At the curb, I hesitated. My car waited, but so did the unknown. 22 missed calls don't come from grief. They come from desperation. I slid into the driver's seat, the rosary still wound around my hand like armor. The screen lit up again, another message. If you ignore this, you'll regret it. She already knows. She, my sister, the engagement party, the laughter, the toasts. Was my grief just an afterthought in their carefully staged celebration? Or worse, was I the target of something they'd orchestrated long before the funeral began? I started the engine, headlights cutting through the drizzle. The road ahead was empty, yet my chest tightened as if I were being watched. At a red light, I opened the glove compartment for tissues. Instead, a folded envelope slid into my lap. My husband's handwriting across the front, shaky but unmistakable. For her eyes only. My hands trembled. The envelope was dated 3 weeks before his death. And suddenly, the funeral wasn't the beginning of grief. It was the beginning of a puzzle. I pulled over beneath a dim street lamp, the rain tapping the windshield like impatient fingers. My chest burned as I held the envelope, its edges soft from being handled more than once. My husband's handwriting was fragile but deliberate, every letter etched as though he knew it would outlive him. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. If you're reading this, it means they'll already be circling. Trust no one, not your family, not even your best friend. There are papers they want. Don't let them take them. They belong to you. My pulse thundered in my ears. What papers? He had never kept secrets from me. At least, I thought he hadn't. The rain grew heavier, blurring the world outside. I wiped the fog off the glass, only to see headlights in the mirror. A black car idled behind me, too close, its wipers motionless. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Open the drawer in his office. Tonight, before they do. I looked back at the envelope, at the shaky ink, at my reflection in the glass. My husband had known this storm was coming, and he'd left me the only compass I had, his warning. The rosary slipped between my fingers, beads clinking in the silence. Forgiveness, once again, dangling useless. I started the car, ignoring the ache in my throat. Whatever was hidden in that office drawer had cost me my husband, and now it would cost my family their lives. The house felt foreign the moment I stepped inside, as if grief had rearranged the walls. His shoes still sat by the door, untouched, waiting for a man who'd never come home. I wanted to crumble right there, but the envelope's words pinned me upright. His office smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. The desk, usually neat, looked strangely staged, papers stacked too precisely, the lamp angled just so. My breath trembled as I reached for the top drawer. Locked. Of course it was. I searched frantically, opening side drawers, rifling through folders until my fingers brushed something cold at the back. A small brass key taped beneath the shelf. My husband's quiet foresight. The lock clicked. Inside lay a thin stack of documents, bound by a red ribbon. My name on the top page. Beneath it, lines of legal text that made my stomach twist. Property deeds. Shares. Accounts I never knew existed. He had left me everything. Not just our modest home, but investments, land, numbers with more zeros than I could process. And then, tucked between the pages, a photograph. My husband, smiling. My sister at his side. Not close, but too close. Her hand resting on the edge of his chair, like she belonged there. My pulse stuttered. The phone rang again, my mother's name glowing on the screen. I let it ring, staring at the photograph, at the truth I hadn't wanted to imagine. This wasn't just betrayal. This was inheritance. And it came poisoned. The phone finally fell silent, but the house wasn't quiet. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder rolling like a verdict. I clutched the stack of deeds, the photo wedged inside like a splinter. A knock at the front door snapped through the air. Not gentle, urgent. I froze. Then a voice. My sister's. Open up. We need to talk. Her tone wasn't mourning. It was business. I tucked the documents beneath my coat, heart hammering. When I opened the door, she stood there in her engagement dress, rain-speckled and shimmering, mascara streaked but eyes sharp. Behind her, my mother hovered, arms crossed, face pale with something between fear and entitlement. You shouldn't have found those, my sister said flatly. The words sliced deeper than any condolence ever could. My mother stepped forward, voice brittle. He promised those assets to us. You wouldn't know how to handle them. Give them to your sister. It's what he wanted. I laughed, a sound raw, foreign, almost violent in its calm. Funny. He seemed to think otherwise. I tapped my coat pocket. Their eyes flickered. Desperation. Calculation. Not grief. Never grief. My sister's hand trembled, but her words didn't. You think you've won, but those papers mean nothing without signatures. Without the family's consent. I stepped back, letting the storm's light cast across the room. Then maybe it's time a different family weighed in, the kind that wears robes and gavels. And just like that, silence. They knew exactly what I meant. The courtroom smelled of old wood and sharpened pencils, but to me it smelled like air after a storm. Raw, clean, inevitable. My mother sat 2 rows behind my sister, both in muted colors, as though grief could be costumed. They wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge's voice was steady, decisive. The assets and properties are legally transferred to the widow. Contest dismissed. It wasn't triumph, I felt. It was release, the kind my husband must have hoped for when he hid that brass key. As the gavel struck, my mother finally looked at me. Her lips parted, a whisper carried across the room. We only wanted to protect you. Protect. The word curdled on my tongue. Protect from wealth? From truth? From the photograph still folded in my purse? I rose, clutching the deeds like they were more than paper. They were proof. Proof that love leaves traces even when betrayal tries to bury them. On the courthouse steps, the sky broke open with sunlight. My sister trailed behind, her engagement ring glinting like a warning. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only silence, heavy and choking. I breathed in deep, the rosary warm in my palm. Once a symbol of forgiveness, now it felt like armor, reminding me that peace can be chosen, even when it's not offered. I didn't need revenge carved in fire. This quiet clarity was enough. If this ever happened to you, just say same in the comments.